The sun hung low in the sky, casting a somber orange glow over the small town of Willow Creek. The air was still, too still, as if even nature itself was holding its breath. The sound of muffled footsteps echoed down the street, a procession of mourners slowly making their way to the cemetery. It was a funeral, and the town's grief was palpable. Yet, among the mourners, one figure stood out, a dog. Max, a large German shepherd with a coat that gleamed in the fading light, trotted solemnly behind the procession. His fur was matted with the dirt of the road, his eyes fixed ahead, unwavering. Max had never been part of any family's formal ceremony. He wasn't a pet, not in the traditional sense. He belonged to no one and everyone. He had always roamed the streets of Willow Creek, showing up at every corner, at every doorstep, a loyal companion to all, yet tied to none. As the group neared the cemetery, the dog's movements became more deliberate, as though he had a purpose that even the mourners didn't understand. The few onlookers who noticed him exchanged puzzled glances. "He never goes to funerals," one of them muttered under their breath. Not like this, but Max wasn't just following the procession. He was leading it, leading them to something, or rather, someone. The air seemed to shift as they walked further into the cemetery. The ground was damp from the recent rain, the scent of earth and death heavy in the air. Emma, a young woman in her early 20s, walked at the head of the procession, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She clutched her father's arm, Michael, for support. The two of them had just lost someone very close, someone they never thought they'd have to bury. Their grief was suffocating, and they couldn't understand why Max was here, why he was following them. But neither of them had any idea that this dog had a connection to their lost loved one, a connection that would change everything. As they reached the gravesite, Max stopped abruptly. He sat down, his tail tucked beneath him, his gaze fixed on the freshly dug hole. The mourners stood in a tight cluster, unsure of what to do next. It was an unusual sight. This lone dog, so far removed from the funeral, yet seemingly so integral to it. "Maybe we should just keep going," Michael whispered, glancing at the dog. But Emma's eyes were locked on him. There was something about his presence that pulled at her heartstrings, something that felt familiar. Without a word, Emma stepped forward, her boots crunching on the gravel. She stopped just in front of Max, her breath catching as she looked down at the dog. She could see his fur was tangled and wet, but there was a quiet dignity to him that commanded her attention. Max didn't look up, but his ears perked as if he had heard her. A soft whine escaped his throat, and he slowly turned his head, locking eyes with Emma. That's when the truth hit her. A realization so powerful, so overwhelming, that she felt as though the ground beneath her feet had suddenly given way. "Max," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it really you?" The dog's response was silent, but unmistakable. His eyes, those deep, soulful eyes, spoke volumes. He was the same dog that had appeared at the door of her childhood home every day after school. The dog that had stayed with her family during their happiest moments and their hardest. He was the dog that had comforted her through her mother's death years ago. He had been there without question, without hesitation. And now, here he was, at her father's funeral. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she looked back at the casket, realizing the truth that had eluded her until now. Max had followed her mother's funeral years ago too, but that wasn't the full story. He had been there for both her mother and her father. He had been a witness to their love, their pain, their joy, and their heartbreak. Max had known the secrets that no one else had been privy to. The truth was simple but heartbreaking. Max had belonged to her mother, but not in the way anyone had thought. He had been more than just a dog. He had been a keeper of memories, a silent participant in the moments that defined Emma's life. And when her mother passed away, he had stayed, not just as a dog, but as a reminder, a living connection to the love and memories her parents had shared. Michael watched in confusion, still unsure of what was happening. But Emma was no longer listening to him. She was focused solely on the dog, on Max, who had been there through everything. She sank to her knees beside him, her hands shaking as she gently ran her fingers through his matted fur. Max let out a low, mournful bark, his body trembling as he nuzzled her face. And in that moment, Emma understood. Max had known all along that her father was meant to be buried here, by her mother, together. And so, he had followed the procession, bringing them to the place where the two of them would rest, side by side, as they always should have. Michael finally understood, too. He knelt beside Emma, his hand resting on her shoulder, as they both shared a moment of quiet grief. The truth was painful, but it was also beautiful. Max had never left, never strayed. He had always been there, waiting, watching, guarding their love from the shadows. Max's journey was over, but Emma's had only just begun. She knew without a doubt that her mother and father were watching over her. And Max, her faithful companion, would always be there to remind her of the love they had shared. But even as the last mourners filed away, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Max's story. The tears still fell, but there was a flicker of hope in her heart. She understood that Max had been more than a dog. He had been a silent guardian of their past, a dog who had witnessed every tear, every laugh, and every moment of their journey together. And perhaps in some way, he had been carrying those memories for them all along. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Max slowly got up, his joints creaking with age. He gave one last, lingering look at the grave, and then walked towards the horizon, his silhouette disappearing into the gathering night. Emma stood up, taking one last glance at the place where her parents now rested. She felt a weight lift from her chest. She wasn't alone. Max had given her something more precious than anyone could have ever imagined, a connection to a love that transcended time, a love that would never be forgotten. Max's tail wagged one final time as he disappeared, and Emma whispered, "Thank you." She knew, deep down, that Max had been the bridge between the past and the present, and now it was time for her to continue living, carrying the love that Max had kept safe all these years.